Hi folks, John Griffin from IntelliGiant.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, we'll give people a few minutes to join.
Hello.
Hey, we're giving people a couple of minutes to join here. In the meantime, think about if you have any topics, and I apologize if my audio quality isn't good. I'm traveling this week. Right. Yeah, so I don't have any topics that I generated today. I didn't see anything on the TSC Slack channel. I also didn't see anything on the mailing list. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So let's start with Sridhar. Do we have any announcements?
No, I'm still waiting for Boris to confirm on the interns. Unfortunately, he's pretty busy. So I just need his final selection. So I'm just waiting for that. Once he tells me the three names, we will initiate the internship. Then I will share the update here in TSC. That's the only thing I'm waiting on for now.
Okay. Yeah, but bug him, and if you don't hear anything from him by your cutoff, a day or two before your cutoff, let me know.
Sure. Thanks.
Since we work at the same company, I can more directly contact him.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So let's put that as a note.
He has picked one. He has to pick two more. I'm waiting for them.
Okay. All right.
And we received the new Dell server also, so we have all the necessary hardware. Whatever we have ordered for the lab, we have it in the lab now, including the DPU. I think Bluefield 3, right? Yeah.
Okay, so we got a Dell server to Bluefield 3. That's actually that's really excellent.
It got racked and stacked now.
Excellent.
With Bluefield 3, yeah.
Okay. Anything else of that kind from anyone? Artisan, I see you're there. Anything from GitHub or maintainer point of view that you want to inform people of?
Not really. Just Dan asked me to participate in this meeting because, as he said, the agenda of this call is a review process and structure of OPI repositories. So
That's right. So we had a discussion last week about what is the correct structure for incorporating vendor-specific code into our repositories where needed. In particular, bridge style code or bridge approach code or plugin approach code, where we have a common module that wants to run across all of the DPUs and IPUs. And we went back and forth on what's the best way to approach incorporating the vendor specific elements of that. So do you have subdirectories within the module itself? Do you have a per vendor GitHub where you have to pull the right adapters, the right bridges for each module, each other module? Do you have always a whole set of GitHubs for each common GitHub? We settled on that where we need to do this, the best approach seems to be subdirectories within the module itself. And then when you build for a particular vendor and model of DPU or IPU. That's, I think, where the sentiment ended up. But what we need to do as the TSC is come to a final approach and agree on it and start using it everywhere. And again, the discussion was motivated from the EVPN bridge code that's coming in, and specifically the IPU adapter was the first one to come in. And then there was a secondary discussion last week about the process of agreeing to and approving projects and their structure and so on, where projects essentially turn into GitHub repos or sets of GitHub repos that people can pull and build and bind onto their or run rather on their devices. So we want to separate those discussions. So where we need bridge or adapter, the question, I guess, and I asked this question to Mark Sanders last week as well, but I'll ask it to you directly. Can the maintainers get together and decide the right way to structure that, where it needs to be done?
yeah, I see. Yes. What I can say is we already have an example of a core module like OPI SPDK bridge and vendor specific bridges, which just use that core module, right? Like Intel bridge, NVIDIA bridge, Marvel bridge, right? I think we could stick to that approach. And if EVPN guys, they think that this approach limits them, then probably we can discuss and think how we can solve it.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then
because I do not know the specific issue they probably see regarding storage. That approach, it showed itself well. So probably we can organize a separate meeting, or we can create a document where they just list all their concerns, all the pros and cons they see of that specific approach they want to apply. I can list all pros and cons of the approach we use with storage and the SPDK bridge, and then we can decide.
Yeah, yeah, if you just listed them out, we don't need a lot of text and whatnot. We just need a list of the approaches and, as you said, pros and cons. So the SPDK bridge uses separate GitHubs, I believe, correct?
Yes, it is a separate GitHub repo.
And and it's a GitHub per vendor plus a GitHub for the SPDK storage implementation itself, which means, if we're so let's project this out a few years. We could end up with 5 vendor bridges, all in separate GitHubs, plus the module itself, and that's repeated for every module we have. So we multiply the number of repos we need by 5. That's my only concern. Is that a valid concern or not a valid concern from your experience with working with GitHub and open source and OPI?
At this moment, we do not have like active involvement of different vendors, so it's hard to conclude, right?
But let's suppose, so let's take the SPDK structure and say that was the way we were going to go, right? So we have the core SPDK, and then we have a set of SPDK bridges, one per vendor. So to support SPDK, it takes us right now 4 repositories. Again, active or not, we don't worry about that. But in principle, it takes us 4. If we picked up a couple more, DPU implementations, it could grow to 5 or 6. Okay, and so that it's 5 or 6 repos to support SPDK, and the EVPN bridge, we would end up with the same thing. We would end up with 4 or 5 or 6 repos for the EVPN bridge. Now, the only thing I'm concerned about that has one value in that, all the vendors control their own fate with respect to each of the modules they support. And so it's logically clean from that point of view. The thing I worry about is when you get GitHub projects with dozens and dozens of repos, because there's not a hierarchical structure below the project that I know of, it becomes unwieldy to interact and deal with it, even though you have scripts and things. And it's not like we can easily create some overlay that shows a different sort of view and organization that clumps these things. So that's what I'm concerned about, is it's just a lot of repos for every repo.
Yes, but from another point of view, if we have only one repo and we have all vendor-specific modules in one repo, then we can raise a question, for example, how do we proceed with release process for different vendors? If you have only one repo, do we separate vendor per branch? But essentially it is very close, like a vendor, each vendor has its own repo. If they all in one, I think it can also affect us with some limitations, but in its own way.
All right, okay. So I think the best way to proceed is list out the reasonable approaches. I mean, you don't have to list out every approach, and any approach where it's like, go to the vendor site to get the bridge code. No, it has to be contained within OPI itself. Other than the fact that you'll have to have, a vendor library and with the card itself and all, loaded up to run the stuff at all, but that's kind of a given. And this is building on top of what each vendor provides as their DP or IP release. So don't worry about that part, but from the point of view of the OPI itself, list out the couple or three, and I think there's no more than three possible approaches and what the trade-offs are, as you said, the pros and cons. And let's review that next week or the week after. I don't think we ought to wait much longer because we have, a pending, we have some pending work that needs to proceed.
Uh,
Regarding
Yes, sir.
just to comment on that,
Yes, sir.
first of all, on the different repos regarding the per each core component. Okay, so it is not necessary to go like for example, for 6 repos for SPDK and then another 6 repos for the VPN gateway in order to put like the vendor specific code in those. We can probably find a middle solution and go with different folders in each vendor bridge according to the core component that they would like to serve. So for instance, if you have like a bridge for Intel that it is that holds right now the code for SPDK. It could be like an SPDK folder in that bridge that can actually hold the code. And then you could have like another folder in the same GitHub repo for the EVPN gateway bridge, for instance, to hold the EVPN gateway vendor specific code in another folder in the same repo. So because if we go with yes?
This is how it works for SPDK bridge for storage solution. We just import that core OPI SPDK bridge, and we have just a vendor extension for storage there. And we can easily import any package from EVPN bridge in Intel bridge. That's a viable solution.
I thought that it was working the other way around, like the SPDK bridge process imports the vendor GitHub.
No, it is Intel bridge which imports SPDK bridge.
Yeah, so the problem, okay, so then the question I would have is how do you do the subsetting where somebody wanted to just install SPDK plus one other thing, and we had 8 or 10 projects. They don't want all those, or let's just say they only want one. They only want SPDK, or they only want the EVPN bridge. Does that mean in the vendor bridge repo, you would have different builds that then go to different parts of the different subdirectories, and then you pull in, again, you build against the other repos that you need, and it's all controlled from the point of view of the vendor, and the vendor bridge repo? I mean, again, mechanically, how that would work would be interesting to see. And again, you could use, again, if you start with the example of the SPDK bridge and say, how would I incorporate the EVPN bridge into that in a way that I can build one or the other or both cleanly?
Vendor bridge is a separate application. We just import core component of SPDK bridge, and we control from our application how we run that SPDK bridge. And we can also import EVPN bridge inside our vendor bridge, right? And we can control how we run it, and we can inject our dependency with our vendor-specific modules into that core component and run it. If we need to run on the SPDK bridge, we can pass a command line flag. Okay, please run on the SPDK bridge with for that vendor bridge, right? If you need to run the VPN bridge only, we can pass just another command line argument.
Yeah.
I mean, the other suggestion we could do is, this is John Griffin from Intel. I guess if they're kind of separate kind of use cases for one is almost the opposite of the other, we could create another set of repos, or another repo, we'll say, which is just plugin specific. And then from the EVPN, just pull in that. And like Demetrius was saying there, have a subdirectory, which is EVPN. Inside that is the Intel specific, we'll say, plugin. It kind of depends on what's there already. If it fits into that model.
Yeah, and I agree you could make So we could make actually any of the approaches work, include, they just have different trade-offs for how things get reviewed and where things are controlled, and then how you do the build, right? Because make files can are not in charge of you. You're in charge of the make file, and the make file can fairly easily build subsets of anything. Or at least it used to be able to, and I think it's only gotten better, since I did this stuff actively. And so I'm not, and again, you can build for different models, you can build for different vendor library releases, you can build different combinations and subsets. And again, there's an attractiveness from doing it all from a vendor repo, where that's where you control all the builds for that model of DPU or IPU. There's also attractiveness from having everything for particular models module self-contained, like pull all the vendor stuff for SPDK into SPDK and you just do it all there. And at the top level of that guy, you decide where to what to build, but that means SPDK bridge is completely self-contained. Now, where that falls apart is if you have a complicated arrangement, again, at some future state of a lot of these modules, then you might want to optimize how the bridge is being incorporated or so on. And now I've got to go to 18 places to change when I change my vendor specific, as opposed to going to one repo, and maybe even I have consolidation inside of there of my bridge libraries. And so I have to change many fewer places. The only thing I don't think we want is a set of repos, one per vendor, for each module
Project, yeah.
building. I think
Yeah.
that's the only thing we don't want.
Yeah, I think we definitely don't want that. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
It
So how do
serves
we?
nobody.
Okay. So how do we? So can we get a proposal for this that says, here's the clean way to do it within the OPI GitHub, and we can do a quick review and agree to that?
Yeah, I can definitely be part of that from Intel.
Okay.
Also, I would like to state before we go there that the OPI VPN bridge architecture that we have discussed in previous TSC meetings, it is difficult to adapt on having like a needle bridge where you have different components underneath, like SPDK or a VPN gateway bridge. The architecture of that use case right now does not. I don't think it fits directly on that, and it will take a long time to fit if we decide to go this way.
Well, so Demetrius, then what's your guys' proposal for how to structure this so we could run the EVPN bridge on Intel, NVIDIA, and Marvell?
I mean, initially,
yeah.
Mhm.
Good.
Initially, what we had in our mind is that you have like a folder inside OPI VPN bridge, okay? And in that folder, you have subfolders for the different vendors, where different vendors can actually directly put the code there, or can actually put the code in some other GitHub repo, and we can actually clone that repo and copy that code in those folders
Yeah.
for each vendor.
Yes.
So yeah,
So John Artison's suggestion was basically have a vendor repo where I have my subfolder in there's my EVPN support, which might then also have a common across all modules, library for that vendor, and go that approach. It's very similar to the subfolder approach, the within the module itself, but it does provide a separate control point for bringing vendor code in that the vendor code's not scattered across every module. It's all sort of contained. again, you just have to refactor in a slightly different way, but it doesn't change what you're talking about, Demetrius. I don't believe.
I mean, I need, maybe you're right. I need to see the proposal for that, but I don't believe that it would be that easy as we are discussing right now. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, so again, it's in both cases, I have to do selective builds of code that's sitting somewhere, and whether that selective build of the vendor bridge code sits in my folder tree, my directory tree, or whether it sits in another directory tree, it's effectively just sits in a directory tree that I pull and locate somewhere, and I set the root of it, and then I can get to all that code. I mean, there's nothing magic here in that way. In other words, we could, I mean, at least from my direct experience and what I used to do, I could have made it work either way. In fact, I mean, I am sure we've all had that experience. So
Yeah, maybe
Actually,
we can do that, but I think Artek said that we will have like the bridge, the Intel bridge, for instance, and then we will have the plugin there, and then we will import the whole EVPN gateway bridge code, like the core code on that bridge, and then we will, according to a flag that we're passing, and I think this is different architecture on
but,
that.
well, but again, you could do it the other way. You could do it from, so again, the SPDK bridge could have done it the other way.
Yes.
It could have done it from the point of view of the SPDK bridge core module, core code, and then you build it for each vendor. Much like I can cross compile for, MIPS or ARM or x86 or any number of other historical architectures. I can tell it, go grab, I can basically have my make file, build the core code, and then go grab code from somewhere else and build it for a specific architecture instruction set, again, against a specific vendor library. And I just have to tell it where to go get that code. And as
Yeah,
long
this
as
is what we are proposing right now.
yeah. Well, so
It's
the only question then is, where does that code live? Because if the vendor code lives in every module, that has scattered control point for the vendor code coming in.
actually, there are very well-known approach how to implement plugin, right? What we want to implement is plugin, right? We just have core code, which requires an interface, then there's specific code, implement that interface, inject into the core code, and core code can use that plugin. That's all. That's how it works at the moment with SPDK bridge, and probably what I'd like to see for other domains like EVPN.
Right.
And Dimitrios was right that what I was proposing, we import the core components like SPDK bridge or EVPN bridge in, let's say, Intel bridge. We inject those interfaces, implementing our plugins. Then we run that core components, and they use just those plugins. That's all.
Yeah, I think with the current architecture that the VPN gateway bridge that we have right now, what Artek is proposing right now, I don't think it will work easily if we decide to go this way.
Okay, so I'd like to. Okay, I think we need to review and understand why. This is the trade-off we were talking about earlier. That's what we need to come to a conclusion on, because I hear the disagreement. I don't see that you can't make it work either way fairly cleanly myself. I don't see that, but so we need to go through and show here's why it doesn't work well.
I think if we maybe got together and a kind of a sub meeting just to come up with a proposal. Maybe come back to next week, something like that. Is it?
That
Is
would
it?
be lovely.
Yeah.
And yes, that would be fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
So,
Who else should come besides the three of us or four of us, maybe? Are we the kind of principal stakeholders?
so anyone's of course would be welcome if they're willing to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let
If you
people
want-
volunteer. So John, if you want to organize that,
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah.
then
If you want to discuss that next week, I just want to warn you that I'm going to be on vacation. I won't manage to participate.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I will
well,
be
you
on
can-
vacation the week after that.
Okay.
well, we'll have to. So Arsa, maybe we could get your input, today or tomorrow, or
I suppose my input is clear, but I'd like to understand why EVPN Bridge cannot adapt that, approach. What the exact problem? Then I can, suggest how to overcome that from code perspective of view, right?
yeah,
The main
Demetrius.
language we use.
Yeah, so Demetrius, maybe what you could do to kick this off is explain why the SPDK bridge approach and what we've been discussing is problematic for the EVPN bridge. Say, look, here's why. It's because when you go to do the build, boom, the following things happen. When you go, when you're looking at how the code is structured in the repo, here's the following consideration. This is why it would be a challenge to take the SPDK bridge approach. And again, you could make the current SPDK bridge approach, or you could take the start at the SPDK bridge and pull the vendor code in equivalent. And those are equivalent to me, but maybe there's a difference that I don't appreciate, or by appreciate I mean understand sufficiently. And you could explain why not having the vendor code in the repo would be a challenge. Again, so I don't want to block development, but we have to make a decision on which way we go. And I think if we have it both ways, long term, it's not so good. I think we need to pick a way and stick to it. But so Demetrius, maybe you could write up a little thing with maybe a diagram or two that said, here's why I was saying what I was saying. Let me show you.
I mean, I can do that. That's not a problem. But first of all, I have no idea how the SPDK bridge works, so I need to study this one, first of all. Second, I think we have like three approaches. Okay, maybe we need to list them out. The first approach is to actually have directly the vendor code inside the core GitHub, EVPN Gateway Bridge core GitHub repo in subfolders. This is like approach number one. The second one is to have it in a different repo, like an Intel bridge or an NVIDIA bridge, and then pull it from there, and then build the core EVPN Gateway Bridge process, the core binary, with that code when we import it, when we clone it actually. And then the third one is what Artek is saying, is to actually having the vendor code in one of the bridges, and then not importing the vendor code, but importing the whole EVPN Gateway bridge.
Right.
And this is, to my perspective, is like a different architecture completely on what I don't think it will work.
Can you
But
repeat the difference between the first and the second? Just probably didn't get.
Say that again. Sorry.
Can you repeat the difference between the approach number 1 and 2? Probably.
Yeah, the difference is that we save the code directly on the VPN Gateway Bridge repo, the vendor code. And the second one is to put it in another repo, the vendor
But we
plugin.
import in VPN core bridge, right?
Between the two, you mean? You import some libraries from some libraries of the EVPN gateway bridge from the vendor code, yes, and then from EVPN gateway bridge also you import some things from the vendor plugin, I believe. Yes, you're right on that.
Okay.
So, Arsa, maybe what you could do is write up the summary of how the SPDK bridge works. You know, how it's structured, and just at I guess a medium high level, how does it work? And then Demetrius, if you could write up the EVPN one and how that's structured and why it works, and then we could exchange notes, and maybe John and Mark Sanders and others could then try to understand if there's a fundamental difference or if the difference can be bridged over. And again, Demetrius and Artisan, you guys can as well, right? We can, as a group, we can go, oh, okay, I see there is a fundamental difference. So what are we going to do? Are we going to have two ways to do it, and we'll pick on a module by module basis? Or can we resolve the differences in a way that doesn't completely break the bridge? Because, yeah, Demetrius, we sure don't want you going back and having to refactor and restructure, your entire set of code to pull this stuff in. But I don't want to give up.
I'm going to do that. I mean, if we decide, I mean, we still have the vendor plugin ready for quite a while right now. It is like 2 months. And if we decide that we do not merge this one and we do something else when it comes to structure and stuff, this will be like way off our timeline for sure. So we can go with a middle way, like merging, accepting whatever we have right now, and until we put like a plan in place on how to proceed, then we try to adapt on that plan, to try to adapt the code based on that plan. Or if we don't go with this way and we decide that we do not merge anything until we have like a proper structure, and then we change all the code in order to adapt in that proper structure, then this will be way off our deadlines.
If you have to change all the code to adapt to the structure, then I think we haven't thought about the problem correctly. But to your point, can we have an interim just to get the EVPN bridge in and going? We could. I don't know if other people have thoughts about having an interim approach, as long as we commit to all moving to the final answer, whatever that is.
I mean, right now the VPN gateway bridge is like for a specific use case. We have discussed this in the past. I mean, it also uses its own APIs, and we have said that when we have like a general API and a standardized API from OPI perspective that also covers the VPN gateway bridge, at some point we will move the whole code to adapt to that API. So I think it's the same case here. Until we have everything, all the structures ready, we should not stop us from having whatever we have right now. And of course, in the future, we can adapt to the new structure. I think this is the middle way and makes much sense to me, because if we just stop and until we put the proper structure in place, then we change all the code to adapt to that proper structure, and then we merge the code, then it's, I will say it's like at least 2 months down the road.
No, I agree that's at least a month.
I mean, if you put vacation in place, then I think it's more.
Yeah, well, we can't account for real life here.
Yeah.
That's not our job. But no, I get your point. So let's.
Can I maybe call a meeting between the two guys here? They're principally, I think, the ones who are mostly involved, and we can try and come to kind of a short-term agreement, and then maybe the longer-term agreement. Would that work for people?
That'd be great, John.
Let's do that first, and then we can discuss.
I'll call one for tomorrow before we're
okay. That's before everybody goes on vacation. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And then and again, I don't have any fundamental objection to interim making progress, as long as we, as long as we can pull it back. But John, why don't we do your call first? You can pull Mark Sanders in as well.
Okay.
Because he's another maintainer and understands this stuff very well and is very sensible. So you pull him in and see what you guys come up with, and we can proceed from there. All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments on this discussion?
I have one question. Do we agree on that interim approach, as you have said? Do you agree that today? Because if we agree, or we should actually have the meeting tomorrow and then
Have the
agree.
meeting tomorrow,
Okay,
and then we'll make that call.
All right.
Because again, I can have Mark do all the approvals on Monday.
No, it's not about that. It's about we have an invalid tag in that vendor plugin PR, and I think we should remove that. I'm not saying merging completely.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. But I can have him remove that. Artisan or Mark can remove though. He's gonna be on vacation, so Mark can remove that tomorrow afternoon or Monday morning.
It's fine. Yeah.
Just to clarify about intermediate approach, you mean merging what we have at the moment?
Reviewing, of course, not like completely merge it immediately, but we can agree. What we're trying to agree is that whatever we have as integration right now of the vendor plugin to the whole VPN gateway bridge repo is not against of the TSC opinion, let's say.
Yeah. So again, have the discussion. If we can come to a long-term agreement and we want progress and everything will move there, and we want, we can then evaluate the short-term, take what we have and go with it as long as we have a timeline for the longer term. But go ahead and have that discussion first, and let's understand let's understand if there's anything fundamental or if it can be worked through. My feeling is it should be able to be worked through, but without massive restructuring of the code. But you'll have to tell me. All right. Any other questions or comments on this topic? Okay. Any other topics? Even if you want to raise something for, hey, in 3 weeks, I want to come in and talk about X. Well, not X, but let's call it Y. All right, everyone. In that case, it concludes our call. Thanks, John, for volunteering to try to resolve this, and thank you, Demetrius and Artisan, for the good discussion on this topic. And let's see if we can get to the bottom of it and make a decision here.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.